Most women believe he's drawn to the curve of their body, the glow of their skin, the echo of their laughter across a room. They spend hours perfecting what the mirror reflects, hoping it will cast a spell on his gaze. But what if I told you that what truly stops him in his tracks is none of that? What if I told you that the deepest part of him is magnetized not by motion, but by stillness, not by beauty, but by presence? You see, a man doesn't fall for what dazzles the eyes. Not really. He may glance. He may compliment. But the woman he cannot forget, the one who settles into his psyche like a dream he can't explain, is the one who does not chase the light. She becomes the silence between it. Her allure is not loud. It is not needy. It does not shout to be seen. Instead, she enters the room like an ancient truth, like something he's always known but buried so deep beneath the noise of the world that it startles him when it surfaces. He doesn't even know why his breath catches. He only knows that in her presence, the chaos inside him stops clawing for escape. Stillness is not the absence of motion. It is the mastery of it. It is the quiet command of a woman who no longer flinches to be chosen. She knows her worth is not contingent on his attention, and that very detachment is what ensnares him. Her stillness is a mirror, and in it he sees every wound, every ghost, every shadow he thought he left behind. Carl Jung once said that what we do not make conscious will appear in our lives as fate. The still woman does not seek to control fate, she reveals it. Her presence awakens the unconscious in him, not because she demands it, but because her silence leaves nowhere to hide. He feels exposed, not by her words, but by her being. She doesn't pull his attention, she disarms it. The modern man is overstimulated. His eyes dart, his phone buzzes, his thoughts race. The world rewards performance, noise, reaction. But the archetypal feminine, that eternal current of soul, mystery, and magnetism, doesn't play in that realm. She descends, she grounds, she waits, not passively but powerfully. And in that stillness, she disrupts every frantic impulse inside him. There's a paradox to the feminine that confounds the ego. She is soft, yet unyielding. She listens, not to respond, but to feel. And this threatens the part of him that has learned to conquer, to pursue, to dominate. With her, he realizes he cannot win her. He must earn her, through presence, not performance. Have you ever noticed how men speak differently around a woman who is rooted? Their words slow. Their voice lowers. Their body leans in. It is not because she's performed some trick of seduction. It is because her energy is undisturbed. She is not waiting to be validated. She is witnessing. And there is no harsher mirror for a man than a woman who simply sees him. But here's the secret most women miss. Her stillness is not for him. It is not a tactic. It is not a strategy to provoke desire. It is her natural state. Once she has withdrawn her energy from proving, pleasing, and performing. It is the reward of the woman who has done her inner work, faced her shadow, integrated her pain. She no longer needs attention to feel alive, and that is why she draws it so easily. The man is not obsessed with her because she's unattainable. He's obsessed because she's whole, and wholeness is rare. Wholeness doesn't beg. It doesn't explain. It doesn't flirt with its own disappearance. It simply exists, fully in the now. And men, especially those fractured by their own emotional starvation, are drawn to that presence like wanderers to a fire in the night. You may think this woman is cold. She is not. She is warm in a way that terrifies, because it is not the warmth of seduction. It is the warmth of home, the kind that makes a man remember how long he's been lost. She does not chase. She does not provoke. She invites. And she invites not with words, but with the radical act of being. In a world that begs women to be everything at once, loud, sexy, sweet, compliant, She dares to be still, and that stillness echoes louder than any scream. Stillness is ancient. It is not learned in a weekend retreat or copied from a viral video. It is remembered, buried beneath layers of noise, reactivity, and inherited fear. It is the original language of the feminine, the rhythm before the music, the breath before the voice. And for the man unconsciously seeking reunion with his own fragmented soul, it is a lighthouse. But here's the tragedy. Most men don't know they're seeking it. They chase novelty, chase approval, chase the fantasy of control. And in doing so, they run from the very thing that would calm the storm inside them. Stillness is not thrilling in the way chaos is. It is not adrenaline. It is not validation. It is something far more unsettling. It requires him to feel. To be in the presence of a still woman is to be witnessed without armor, without status, without charm. It is to be seen not for what he projects, but for what he protects. And that is a confrontation the ego does not welcome. That is why so many men, when they finally meet her, retreat. They mistake her calm for coldness. They call her hard to read, too quiet, intimidating. But what they're truly saying is, she sees me in ways I cannot yet bear. He is drawn to her, yes, but also afraid, because her stillness evokes the one thing he's been conditioned to suppress: vulnerability. Not weakness, but true openness. The kind that isn't performed for applause. The kind that breaks down the persona and exposes the boy inside the man. She is not his therapist. She is not his mother. She is the mirror of his unconscious feminine, the anima Jung spoke of. The muse, the mystery, the one who awakens the buried truths of his soul. She does not do this by fixing him. She does it by not participating in his performance. She waits, not out of passivity, but out of power. Because she knows, if he is meant to rise, he will rise from within. Some will misjudge her. Some will project onto her the wound of every woman who withheld love. Some will accuse her of playing games, of being too much or not enough. But she is not playing. She is being. She has left the game behind. And in doing so, she leaves the man with a choice: evolve or retreat. Have you ever been in a room where someone's energy quiets you without a word? That is her power. She doesn't entertain chaos. She doesn't reward inconsistency. She doesn't contort herself to fit a man's comfort zone. She disturbs his comfort because she embodies truth. And truth, by nature, is disruptive. Most men have been conditioned to confuse urgency with desire. They think they are drawn to what excites them. But the woman who lingers in their mind long after the excitement fades is not the one who chased, who sparkled, who said all the right things. It is the one who didn't try to be remembered, but was. This is not about superiority. The still woman is not above him. She is simply ahead in a different way. She has faced what he has not yet dared to face in himself, and because of that, she becomes the catalyst. Not the solution, the mirror, the wound, and the invitation. She does not need to punish. Her silence does it for her, not as revenge, but as reflection. If he speaks and she does not respond, it is not rejection, it is the absence of resonance. If he performs and she remains unmoved, it is not indifference, it is discernment. She no longer reacts to potential. She recognizes patterns, and in that recognition, she honors her own evolution. What you must understand is this: the feminine is not in competition with beauty. Beauty fades. Presence deepens. He may forget your dress, he may forget your smile, but he will never forget how he felt in your stillness, because in that moment he saw a version of himself he didn't yet know existed, and that kind of encounter haunts a man, not in fear, but in ache, the ache of awakening. You, who have dimmed your light for approval, who have over-explained your silence, who have mistaken stillness for invisibility, listen closely. Your calm is not your weakness. It is your weapon, but not a weapon to harm, a weapon to reveal, and only those ready for truth will stand in its presence. There is a moment, quiet and unspoken, when a man stands before her and realizes he cannot charm his way past her gates. His usual scripts fail. His smile, rehearsed through years of half-hearted victories, lands like dust at her feet. He is not rejected, he is disarmed, because the still woman does not respond to what is rehearsed. She waits for what is real, and real does not come easily to him. Real must be excavated from beneath layers of posturing, pride, and fear. Real requires risk, vulnerability, the terrifying admission that he does not have control here, that to be with her he must feel more than he speaks. Stillness invites no one. It attracts, but it does so only when the noise has cleared. She is not a siren singing men to shipwreck. She is the deep water itself, calm, dark, vast, and if he chooses to enter her depths, he must leave behind the safety of shore. There is no pretending at that depth. No illusion can breathe underwater. Men speak of wanting depth, of craving a woman who is grounded, soulful, self-aware, but they rarely understand what they're truly asking for, because a woman of depth demands their presence, not their performance. She doesn't want to be entertained. She wants to feel him, stripped of the roles, the sarcasm, the scripts. She wants his soul, not his resume. And many men, when they feel the pull of such a woman, become confused. Their instincts clash. One part wants to conquer her, to possess what he does not understand. Another part wants to run, because he knows she will not let him remain half-built. Carl Jung taught that every man carries an inner feminine, his anima, a symbolic counterpart that shapes how he relates to women, emotion, and intimacy. But most men project this anima onto women rather than integrate it within. They seek externally what they have not claimed internally, and so they fall again and again for the illusion of the feminine without ever meeting its truth. Until her. She does not amplify his illusion. She shatters it, and in that fracture, he either collapses or begins the climb into his own wholeness. She does not push, she does not plead. She waits, and her waiting is not passive, it is fierce, because it says, "I will not carry you where you refuse to walk." She does not seduce him into his healing. She creates the space in which he must choose it. This is the feminine archetype beyond the girlhood of longing, beyond the maiden who flirts to be seen. She is the sovereign, the inner queen, the one who does not beg to be chosen, because she already has chosen herself, her peace, her power, and in choosing herself, she becomes unforgettable. There is something haunting about a woman who no longer needs the world to validate her. She walks through life like a cathedral, hollowed by silence, filled with light, echoing with the sacred. Men pause in her presence not because she demands it, but because she reflects back to them the parts of themselves they have long abandoned. You, watching this, may feel the stirring, the ache of recognition. Perhaps you've been her, or perhaps you're becoming her. Perhaps you've silenced yourself thinking stillness meant invisibility, but you were never invisible. You were unreadable, and unreadable women terrify men who rely on prediction to feel powerful. Stillness is unpredictable. It is the antithesis of codependency. It is not reactive. It is sovereign, and that sovereignty is its seduction. The more grounded she is, the more untouchable she becomes, not because she is unavailable, but because she chooses with discernment. And discernment, to the immature ego, feels like rejection. But to the awakened man, to the man who has begun to do his shadow work, who has stared down his own mother complex, who has begun the alchemical journey of individuation, her stillness is not a threat. It is a guidepost. a portal, a homecoming, because in her presence he remembers something older than words. He remembers the kind of love that is not laced with need, the kind of attention that is not bought with performance. He remembers peace, and that memory haunts him in all the best ways. The still woman is not empty. She is full of experience, of memory, of knowing. Her silence is not a void, but a sanctuary. And when a man enters her presence, what he feels is not absence, but invitation. Invitation to descend into his own depths, to meet himself in places he's been too afraid to explore. This is where the unconscious awakens, where his defenses begin to tremble under the weight of something far older than romance, archetypal memory. Somewhere in his ancestral bones, he recognizes her, not as a lover, not as an ideal, but as a force. She is not the storm. She is the still I within it. And this terrifies him, not because she intends to harm, but because she refuses to entertain his illusion of control. Her boundaries are not walls. They are mirrors, and what he sees in them is the truth of himself, the unfinished man, the distracted man, the man who has loved with half a heart and called it enough. She will not punish him for this, but she will not participate in it either. That is her gift and her power. She removes herself, not to create distance, but to preserve integrity. And for the first time in his life, he realizes that a woman's absence can speak more truth than her presence ever did. Stillness is clarity. It does not beg for understanding. It creates it. When she goes quiet, when she no longer feeds the drama, when she lets the silence stretch without apology, that is when the real conversation begins. The one he has been avoiding with himself. It is in that silence that his projections unravel. The fantasy dissolves, the mask slips, and what remains is not rejection, it is reality. A reality in which he must confront his own emotional immaturity, his avoidance, his fear of being truly seen. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. She does not fight his unconscious, she reflects it. She becomes the stage upon which his inner world is revealed, and this, more than anything, is why he cannot forget her. Because forgetting her would mean forgetting the moment he almost met himself. She is not obsessed with being understood. She is not invested in explaining her stillness, because she has realized something few women ever dare to embrace. The deepest kind of feminine power is not loud. It is resolute. It is the power of a woman who is no longer afraid to be misunderstood, who no longer fears losing a man who was never grounded enough to find her. And what happens to the man who touches this kind of presence? He changes, not always immediately. Sometimes he walks away. Sometimes he ghosts. Sometimes he returns to the familiar arms of chaos, of noise, of women who perform love like theater. But something in him shifts, quietly, irrevocably, because once you've stood in front of truth, no lie feels like home again. He may not know what to call it, he may not speak of it, but her stillness lingers, in his thoughts, in his choices, in the way he begins to hunger not for more, but for depth, because she was not the climax of his desire. She was the beginning of his becoming. You may wonder, is it worth it to walk this path? To be the woman who does not chase, who does not flinch, who lets her silence speak what her words could never say? To be the one who waits, not for a man, but for alignment? The answer is yes. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. And truth does not come to the one who begs. It comes to the one who becomes it. You are not forgotten, because you are still. You are unforgettable because you are still. In a world addicted to urgency, to validation, to noise, your stillness is a rebellion, a sacred act, a declaration that you will not abandon yourself to be loved, because you have remembered something vital. You were never meant to perform your worth. You were meant to embody it. Stillness is not static. It is the pulse beneath the surface. It is the rootedness of a tree that does not chase the wind, yet bends without breaking. It is the soft breath before the storm, the quiet in the eyes of a woman who has nothing left to prove. She has died 1,000 tiny deaths, each one a letting go of who she thought she had to be. And now she stands, unshaken, because she has become. To the uninitiated man, her stillness is unreadable. To the awakened man, it is scripture. He reads her not through words, but through vibration. She speaks in frequency, not performance. Her energy teaches what her mouth never needs to say. I am already whole. I am not waiting for you to complete me. And in that, she becomes dangerous. Not because she wishes to dominate, but because she cannot be manipulated. A woman who does not seek permission to rest in her own being is a threat to every system that profits from her self-doubt. She no longer dances for validation. She no longer shapeshifts to avoid abandonment. She sits with herself, fully. And from that stillness rises something unbreakable. In psychological terms, she has integrated her shadow. She has faced the rage, the shame, the ache of being overlooked, and she has not run. She has stayed, held herself, wept without witnesses, and in doing so, she has built an internal trust that no man, no rejection, no silence can shatter. Men feel this, even those who cannot name it. It is not something she flaunts. It is something she embodies. Her walk changes. Her eyes soften. Her presence expands. She does not need to seduce. She magnetizes. Not by effort, but by essence. The Jungian anima, when distorted, becomes a fantasy that men chase but never hold. But when real, when embodied in a conscious woman, it becomes a force of evolution. A man cannot remain asleep in her arms. She will not coddle his ego. She will not soothe his avoidance. She will not play the mother to his boyhood wounds. She will hold space, yes, but she will not fill it for him, because her stillness is not silence born of fear. It is silence born of sovereignty. It says, "You may come. You may go. I remain." It says, "I trust the timing, not the tension." It says, "I choose peace over performance, self-respect over validation, truth over tactics." And to the right man, to the man who is ready to rise into his own depth, this is not intimidating. It is liberating, because he too has tired of the game. He too has suffered in the prison of surface connections. He too aches to be seen without needing to win. But he must meet her there, not in pursuit, but in presence. He must turn inward. Face the parts of himself he has silenced. Become still enough to hear the voice beneath his thoughts, the one that says, "You are more than what you perform." Stillness calls him inward, not toward her, but toward himself. And when he has touched that inner ground, when he has quieted his chaos, only then can he truly meet her. Not as a conqueror, not as a savior, but as a mirror. Two sovereigns, no longer seeking to complete one another, but to reflect, to witness, to amplify. This is not a fairy tale. It is not a path for the faint-hearted. It is a spiritual initiation disguised as a relationship, and it begins always with a woman who dares to be still. She does not beg to be seen. She does not rush to be understood. She does not fill the silence with noise, hoping he won't leave. She allows him to choose, fully, freely, and in that choice, he meets the truth of who he is. Some will walk away. Some will return to the familiar noise. But the man who stays learns to speak in silence, to see in stillness, to love without possession. And he will never forget her, not because she chased, but because she didn't have to. The woman who has embraced stillness no longer confuses solitude with lack. She knows the difference between loneliness and alignment, between attention and resonance. She has learned, often through heartbreak, that not every connection is meant to be claimed. Some are meant to awaken, others to release. But none are worth the betrayal of her inner peace. And so she waits, not for him, but for truth, for the energy that matches her depth, for the soul that does not tremble in the face of her silence, but bows to it. She is no longer the girl pacing by the phone. She is the woman who forgets it's even ringing, because her world is too full of meaning to be interrupted by half-hearted noise. She knows that her value does not rise or fall with the tides of male desire, that she is not more worthy when pursued, nor less worthy when ignored. She is the storm and the calm, the flame and the hearth. She holds contradictions like holy relics, knowing that in her stillness lives the power to summon kings and release them without bitterness. This is the death of the performance. This is the birth of essence. Carl Jung believed that the individuation process, becoming who you truly are, requires a descent into shadow, into silence, into the parts of you that long to scream, but instead choose presence. The still woman has walked this path, not perfectly but courageously. She has cried through closed doors and risen without applause. She has buried old selves and emerged each time more rooted, more luminous, less willing to shrink. She is not waiting for a man to rescue her from herself. She is waiting for the man who has rescued himself, the one who has sat in his own darkness and chosen to stay, the one who no longer confuses conquest with connection, the one who does not fear her power because he has owned his own. And when they meet, it will not be fireworks, it will not be noise, it will be recognition, a quiet knowing, a breath, a stillness so vast it drowns every illusion in its wake. No more chasing, no more proving, no more performing, just presence, just peace, just the echo of something ancient returning to itself. Because in the end, the woman he cannot forget, the one who lives in his marrow long after her voice has faded, is not the one who danced for his affection, nor the one who pleaded for his love. It is the one who stood still, unmoved, unshaken, unfolding her worth like a temple door that would not open for the unworthy. And so, she is not remembered because he possessed her. She is remembered because he couldn't. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.